Greetings everyone. Now many of you may have seen this man before. His name is Richard Dawkins, the author and writer of the book The God Delusion. Richard Dawkins is also known for his many debates with people such as John Lennox and many other apologists in the world today on the belief of God and atheism. Now ever since I watched a documentary called Evolution vs. God by Ray Comfort, I've been really interested on the concept of God and also on evolution, because many times I hear about arguments towards God, and typically I hear the same arguments from Richard Dawkins rub off on some people who believe in the concept of evolution, namely atheists. Arguments such as,
he took what we all deserved. We all deserve to be beaten and nailed to some sticks. We all deserve to burn in hell for all eternity. We all deserve that.
An invisible man in the sky made a baby with a human virgin about 2,000 years ago, which means God became human, and then God killed his son on a cross. I mean, he killed himself on a cross, therefore taking the punishment for the sins of the human race. So therefore, Jesus paid your fee, and God can legally dismiss your case. But you gotta believe in him, otherwise hell. Makes sense?
Now, what I find interesting on the concept of evolution and atheism is the term that they typically try to put forward without even knowing the beginning, and that is morality. Now, typically, if you're going to have morality, you need to have somebody who puts forward laws, and therefore it's strange that you can have laws without a lawgiver. So though one doesn't know exactly how morality comes together without a lawgiver, it's interesting that when I hear these certain debates, I always hear the concept that God is evil, yet you don't know where morality comes from. And it even goes to the point that though the Bible shows that God is love, you would put down the cross of Christ and make a sarcastic comment about it, just like this woman has done in her video. Well, I guess because it's a lot easier to mock something that you're completely ignorant about. So on one hand, you're saying God is evil because he was destroying people, but on the other hand, when you hear that Christ has died for each and every one of our sins, you look at it as a silly concept. Sounds like a deeper issue to me. Now, I took the liberty to do some research on the book The God Delusion and try and find some quotes just to kind of bring out this deeper issue that we're seeing. And based upon the research that I've done, I believe it spawns back to the video that I originally did about God. And that deeper issue is simply the character of God. Now notice what Richard Dawkins says in his book about God's character. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty, ethic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infadical, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, masochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. Wow. Well, it seems like we're looking at the real issue, right? The problem that the world is seeing today is a complete misrepresentation of the character of God. And I mentioned in my video Love Speech versus Hate Speech how this caused the rise of the French Revolution in the Dark Ages. And based upon my research, there are three main areas which focus upon this misrepresentation. Those three areas are homosexuality, the belief in eternity in hell, and genocide. Now, as you probably know, I've covered the topic on homosexuality, and also I've covered the topic on hell. Now, you may want to watch that because I've covered not only based upon the worldview, but I also go into the Bible and see what God really has to say about these subjects, because it's not the way it seems today. But the question is there an answer towards genocide in the Bible? Yes. But before we go into the topic of genocide, we have to see things on its natural premise. In the book of Exodus, the same book that, Richard Dawkins displays God to be, Moses asks God for a serious request. Moses said, "Please show me your glory." And God said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you and will proclaim before you my name, the Lord, and I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy." Now, why is this key when it comes down to this point of God? And what does this have to do with genocide? Well, according to the verses that we just read, God didn't really answer Moses' request, did he? Or so it would seem. Moses asked for God's glory to be seen, but God replies by saying, "Yeah, I'll show you my goodness." So what God was saying is that his glory is his goodness. It's like saying, for example, "Hey John, can you show me what your car looks like?" Yeah, I can show you my Mercedes. The same way a car was requested, but the answer was a Mercedes, a car and a Mercedes is the same thing, just as it is with God's glory and His goodness being the same thing. So as God is displaying that His glory is His goodness, we need to recognize something. Goodness is a characteristic. Therefore, God's glory represents His character. And that's why you see afterwards He said He'll be merciful and He'll be gracious. So instead of looking at things from the outside or from the surface, let's do what hasn't been done by those who bring up these accusations and see exactly what God was doing. Because we're going to see if God was actually performing genocide or not. Okay, let's begin in part 2. Now in part 2 we're going to see some really interesting results when it comes towards genocide, because you'd be surprised to see what the true turnout is. Because obviously when I heard about this I was a bit shaken about it as well, until I studied it out for myself and saw what the true agenda was with God and the topic of genocide. So it's understandable, but if you're not looking at things on a deeper level and just looking at it on the foundation, then you're obviously going to see this picture of hatred, anger, and basically what Dawkins said in his book. But for now, as I mentioned earlier, I've covered 2 of the 3 main areas which people have a problem when it comes to God, and that is the topic of homosexuality and the topic of hell. And they're all going to be available in the description box below so that you can have a look and see what the Bible truly says about those of homosexuality and those of the topic of hell. Okay, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this. Part 2 is going to be up very soon. And yes, take care, God bless, bye for now.
Sin can keep you out of heaven, and God will purge sin from His universe with fire. But does the Bible teach that the lost burn forever in hell? If you're an agnostic, you might be thinking, if that's the kind of God you serve, I don't want anything to do with Him. I could never respect or love a God who burns people in hell forever just because they don't love Him in return. A well-meaning Christian might say, God is God. Who are we to judge what He does or doesn't do?